In this video, we'll be looking at recreating this type of rendering. This is a pretty easy rendering coming out of a rendering software and a 3D modeling system with limited Photoshop skills needed. You can walk through the file first. If you look over here in the layers section, I have broken my layers up into folders, which you can make a new folder down here. The top folder is all of the people, which if you can you see that's just the people in that folder, people and their shadows. And then the line work that just kind of lightly defines everything is in the next folder. The lighting is in the next, and the kelp is in the next. The original file looks like this. And this comes straight out of the Revit software. I rendered in the cloud this particular image. This is set for daytime lighting. So let's get started. Move this back over. So this is the first layer. I'm not going to do anything to it. That will come later. So the first step, if you look over here, is creating kelp. If we look inside this folder, we have 3 layers. One which is the reflection on the floor, which acts as a shadow of the light shining through the kelp forest. And then we have the kelp itself within the window and a light seagrass work over here in this tank on the side. All of these work with layer masks to contain them to the right proportions, and I will show you how to do that right now. So for all of this, I have a nifty folder set up with all of my aquarium needs. So we just need to find the kelp file. That is the tricky part, apparently, because I lost it. Here it is. So this is the kelp file. It's in my aquarium specific background. And I'm just going to click and drag that in. And it automatically embeds it in this particular one, and you just have to hit enter to finish it off. Resize it to be about the same size that you need it to be, and hit enter. I'm going to knock down the opacity a bit so we can see what's going on behind it. This is one of my favorite parts about doing the non-destructive method. Take one of the lasso tools, whatever which one fits your needs at the moment, and you just click around what you need. Okay, so we selected what we need, and we're going to select the kelp forest layer and this little button down here that will create a new mask. And as you can see, I wasn't quite perfect, which is easy to clean up. So when you're working in layer masks, if you click option and then the layer mask, you can see the actual mask itself. Everything you don't want is black, and everything you do want is white. And it automatically changes your colors to those colors because it likes only black and white in the mask layer. So you can use paint or you can use eraser tools, and you can just get rid of that chunk that we don't want to be the bright mask. You deselect If you click back on the layer, you can see that I filled it in. So that it's just right where you need it to be. If we look back at the original file and we go to where the kelp forest is, this is the layer mixes. You can change them all and they create different different systems. This particular one I picked multiply, which just layers things a little bit differently. It's kind of fun to play with those to see what system works best for you. But that's really up to you. This particular one, it looks best on multiply. So we will start by doing that. So it's right now it's on normal, and we'll just take it to multiply. The next step is to make the reflection on the ground of the kelp. Which if you look at it, it doesn't look like much because it's very opaque and it's set to luminosity, which just changes how the lighting works. So let's start with that. To start with this one, I generally rasterize a layer so that you can select it and then copy and paste it. So you have the same size file. Then it's the fun part. This is all up to your eye and how you want to portray this. So I generally size the top of it to be the same size as the window, and then you go to Edit, Transform, Perspective, because then you can take the edges and warp them out so that it looks like it's coming towards you. If you set it about the plane you want it to be and then hit enter. If you remember, the last one on the original file is very opaque. So if you take this down and you hit it down to a 30, it was like 34, and it was set on luminosity. Which you can see it kind of makes a ghosty shadow. You can see it's a bit fuzzy on this one, which you can get by going to Filter and Blur, and do a motion blur. Let's do a distance of 4. It will be whatever you need it to be, or want it to be. It gives it just a slightly a blur to it, so it's not as distinct. The next step is to add the layer mask on this one, which will stop at the window so that it fits in with what actually would be reflected. I selected a little bit too much there, so we're going to take some off of that. The way you can tell if you're going to take some off or you're going to add it on is up in this corner. And so we're going to push this little button again, and it just applies that layer mask again. Enter, it will align. I'm going to drop that down a little bit more. Okay, so now I'm going to work on seagrass in this table. I have preloaded a bunch of grass textures within my brushes, which is something that you can do. You can download all sorts of brushes from the internet, but you can also, it's fun to play with the shape dynamics of different brushes. Scatter them away from each other. You can see all of the different individual clicks. You can change all sorts of texture on it. We're going to change the color on it so we can get a color that's closer to what we need it to be. You can add texture, you can add a different brush within it. We're just going to do scattering just a little bit. And let's do shape dynamics, size jitter, a little bit. We're going to do a little bit of size jitter and a little bit of the angle jitter just to make it a little bit more dynamic when using it. We're going to add a new layer so that this doesn't interfere with anything else. It's nice to, if you want to rename your layers so that you can keep them all straight. I like adding more and more layers just so that you can keep everything within its own place. So in this layer, we're going to test to see how big it is. Wow, that's really big. So we're going to step backwards and get rid of that. Resize. Let's see how big that is. Okay, it's a little bit bigger. And we're just going to make some seagrass. Not a huge deal of like how they how crazy you get with it. I'm going to change the opacity a bit and make this normal. I don't know why it's all weird, but there we go. Just some basic grass. And then we're going to do what we've done before, where we're just going to make a layer mask of that where we need it to be. So it stops there. And I screwed it up a little bit, so we'll fix that up a little bit. And I'm going to lower the opacity of that just so that it looks like it's kind of behind what's happening with the glass. So next step is adding lighting to this setting. I have made another rendering from Revit that uses the same scene but a different lighting scheme. This one is a nighttime rendering through Revit, so it bumps up lighting a little bit more, and it's a slightly different balance. So we're going to import this to the top, on top of what was already happening with that other one. We're going to select all of it. If you're on a Mac like I am, you can do Command A. I think Control A will do it on a PC, and it will select all of the image, and we're going to copy, and then we're going to go back to our original one, and we're going to paste. As you can see, it just pasted over everything, and you can't see what we just did. So we're going to look at what these will do again, and if we set lighten, you can see that our work with the kelp has come through, because that was lighter than what was in the nighttime rendering. So I'm just gonna leave that as it is. It seems like it's working out how I would like it. Easy enough. So I'm just gonna make my folders again, just because it helps helps me stay organized. Put those in the kelp folder and close it up. So the next step, I like adding a little bit of line work on top of my renderings, just so that they have a little bit more character. And I have downloaded the line work from Revit as a PNG. It's at a very large scale, so all of the line work is really delicate, which is helpful when you're trying to make a high quality rendering, is to have as small of a pixel as you can. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to select all of this, and then, oh, I forgot to copy. Select all of this and copy. And we're going to paste it, and it's going to be giant. So we're going to select this moving button, and then zoom out so we can see the whole thing. And it's the same viewport, so it's the same size as the canvas. So we can just plop it in, and it will be the right size. Hit enter to accept it. We'll zoom back in. You can see it covered everything. Since the scene behind it is kind of mid-tone to dark, we can invert this and make the line work white. So to do that, we're going to hit invert, and it will invert everything underneath it unless you hit this button right here, and then it will only invert what's right below it, which is very handy, because then if we hit this with a screen or a lighten tool, it will take everything that's darker than what's behind it and get rid of it. So it's like a layer mask for all of the black that's in this image when it's inverted. So that's what it was like before, and we just hit screen and it gets rid of all the black, which is very nice. And to make this a little bit less cartoon-like, we're going to take the opacity of the line work down a bit, so you can see it, but it's not overpowering the image. It just adds a little bit of dimension to the edge work that we spent so much time on, so you might as well show it off. Okay, so I think the background of this image is complete. You can add more to it if you'd like, posters or what have you. But I think the next step would be adding people or fish if you wanted to. It's about the same technique. I have saved all of my people from downloading them onto my computer from the internet, all in this folder. I've got so many of them, so I have a lot to choose from. We'll just take a few. I don't think all of them will work for this image. Like these men eating sandwiches, I don't know if that will be useful, but like this little kid that's looking up will be nice. We're going to take him, we're going to shrink him down so he's about the right size in this scene. Hit enter. He's very out of place at the moment, because he's so vibrant, whereas the rest of it is not. We're going to take him, we're going to lower the opacity of him. That just kind of helps him blend into the scene a little bit more. All the shadows kind of fall on him the right way, and it makes it a little bit easier to understand that he's in this room at this point in time. You can play with how opaque you actually make him. You can also play with these. Sometimes they work for blending people in, and it often depends on what person you add in. Some of them work better when you just lower the opacity, and some work better when you play with how they're actually interacting with the scene. Let's add some parental figure to this little kid so that he's not totally alone. And let's add these lovely people. I'm going to put them in about the right size and shape, and we'll just lower their opacity a bit so that they are within the scene as well. We're going to add a few more people just like that. For sizing people, I tend to pick places that I know the heights of. So I know that this tank is 2 feet off the ground, and so at approximately that point it should be probably around the knee, a little bit taller than that, but a little bit taller than the knee at that point for the people that are near it, and that helps to make the rendering a little bit more believable if the people are approximately rightly scaled. And if you built your model right, your 3D model or your image right, you will be able to scale the people appropriately using that method. Okay, so here's just a few people. You can tell that they're just kind of pasted in at this point, which is not always the best look. We're going to add the folder for these. A people folder, and put these in there. So one important thing that often is overlooked is the shadows of the people themselves. It's overlooked often because it's just a weird thing to remember to put in, because often rendering softwares take already placed some shadows, but not all of them. With a well-lit scene like this, that's kind of it has a lot of ambient light in this room, which is nice for lighting, making shadows, because it makes them a little bit easier to make. We're just going to take a brush in a black and make it very soft, round. This is how I do it. You can do it a bunch of different ways. Find other people that have done it. I'm going to hit the mode darken because it doesn't really matter what it is afterwards. But we're just going to add a little bit below all the people on this new layer that I made, so that it just looks like there's some shadow right below them, which helps the believability of actually having people here. You can stretch them out a little bit if they really would have a deep shadow, or shrink the brush a bit, but it is nice to be able to see that there actually would be some person. In a stronger light situation, you can actually take a person and reflect them down and turn them into a shadow. You can find tutorials on that elsewhere. But for this particular rendering, that is what I would do. And I would say this is complete at the moment. It could probably be more photoshopped, but this will do for most situations. And I hope you enjoyed this or learned something from it. And we will see you next time.